welcome to my Tyrannosaurus-Rex. In this video I'll be talking about the arduous journey this guy has taken me through. In the very beginning, the model was designed to act as some kind of mobile artillery, which is why the Tyrannosaurus-Rex was chosen because of its muscular frame and gigantic head, which was perfect for mounting a weapon. Taking inspiration from Warhammer's Forge Fiend, this first bit of concept art shows how the dinosaur would have initially been a mix of hard surface and organic modelling, as we can see the exposed legs and tail contrasting with the armour-plated torso as well as a cannon mounted on its head. The design wasn't too well received over in Polycan, however. One user noted that the design lacked flow and that I should set up a hierarchy of forms first, which was a very valid point looking back. As we can see, the concept was actually very noisy and very busy, and your eye wasn't particularly guided anywhere. So instead of screwing around and shoehorning that concept into something more manageable, I started from scratch, now taking inspiration from Kevin Lanning's work on Gears of War. The variety of materials used in his boomer model was something I could incorporate into my own models as an easy way of creating manageable forms and shapes. As can be seen here, I've organised the design in such a way that it gets increasingly complex the closer you get towards the head, solving the problem the last concept had of lacking real guidance and flow. The design is also more streamlined in general. Using Gears of War as the main source of inspiration also meant that I could use Kevin Lanning's own workflow shown in the Digital Arts Masterclass books. However, despite now having the capacity to realise the model, I found that constructing was far too time-consuming in itself for the time frame I had to work with, sending me back to the drawing board once again. This time the design would be entirely organic, a slightly stylised representation of the classic T-Rex. And instead of sculpting from a base mesh, I opted to sculpt the T-Rex from scratch using Z-spheres with help from Requiem Voice tutorial on YouTube. This meant that I could be much more dynamic with the T-Rex's forms and allowed me to take large changes on the fly, where I'd be restrained to the overall form of a base mesh had I used one. The sculpt would go through several iterations, with Senior Lecturer Greg Pennick helping me push the T-Rex into correct form. Through my own fault, however, its neck remained shorter than it should have been, something that will come back to bite me later on. The final sculpt used a mixture of alphas and straightforward sculpting to achieve the scaly look of a lizard. Using studies of T-Rexes and other similar dinosaurs such as this Allosaur as a guide for sculpting musculature, and basing the detail work on industry professional Kevin Bryant's own sculpts. With the sculpt completed, it was then painted using polypaint inside of ZBrush, making use of its masking features to mask bumps and crevices. The colour scheme went through several iterations. The initial designs were based on two-tone colour schemes using various colours and patterns. The first version of the actual polypainted T-Rex used a very generic beige-green colour scheme, similar to the one used by the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. The next iteration, however, livened up the colour scheme, taking reference from classic depictions of dinosaurs and lizards such as salamanders to create this new, much more vibrant theme. The next step was to extract this polypaint out of ZBrush and onto a low-poly version of the dinosaur. I've always found projection in ZBrush to be hazy at best, so I developed my own pipeline which shifts all of the projection work into 3ds Max, which I found to be much more stable and much less volatile. This workflow simply involves giving the sculpt some temporary UVs where it can store its polypaint to project onto a low poly in 3ds Max. The sculpt is first brought down to its lowest subdivision level, and then given temporary UVs. It's then brought back to the highest subdivision level, where the highest quality polypaint is stored. The high quality polypaint then can be captured into the UVs. The sculpt is far too dense to export as it is, so once again it's returned to its lowest subdivision level. All the while maintaining the high quality polypaint. Now it can be exported as a manageably sized OBJ file. The polypaint can then be projected using a project modifier onto the low poly UVs in Max. The low poly was then rigged using the CAT system built into Max. CAT allows the use of layers to gradually build up animations. As we can see here, the basic walk cycle is stored at the first layer. The second layer adds shifting movement to the torso and around the head. The final layer stores extra animations that add an extra bit of realism. The walk cycle took inspiration from the animations of Primal Carnage's own T-Rex. I took key details such as the sense of shifting mass around the hips, and the slight proportions of the torso on every stride, into consideration on my own walk cycle. The other key detail was how the head is always active, and always moving around, giving the sense that the T-Rex is very much alive. Unlike the walk cycle, whose creation was assisted by preset animations given by Cat, the idle animation was entirely keyframed by hand. Regardless, the same principles of awareness and lucidity in the head, and accurately depicting shifting mass, still applied. This, however, was where the T-Rex's short neck gave me some trouble, as the T-Rex has clear difficulty in looking around. This is most notable during its roar, where the movement of the neck and head is much more rigid than it should have been, and would have been if the neck was longer. With all the animations and texture maps created, the model could then be imported into UDK, where it was tested as an NPC. UDK's built-in animation blending system allowed it to more or less seamlessly transition between the animation cycles previously created. To present the model and its animations, a custom scene was prepared that mimicked the simplicity of the Primal Carnage scene shown earlier. Careful color grading, post-processing and camera animations gave the scene a cinematic quality. The now completed project was posted on Polycount for critique. Only one comment made it through this time, but it was still positive, stating that the animation felt believable, and although the torso was larger and much more voluminous than expected, it didn't look bad and made the proportions on the whole look more appealing. The user also praised the colour palette and contrast used in the texture, stating that it added a unique flair, though the whites were perhaps a bit too bright. The animation and skinning were also deemed of good quality, though some disproportionate skinning meant that there was a little too much stretching in the back of the legs during the walk cycle. In terms of my own critique, I definitely should have lengthened the T-Rex's neck, as it ended up directly impacting the quality of the animations. I should have also spent more time with the sculpt, adding in a higher variety of textures, be it through stubs or scales, or even cuts and wounds, as the current sculpt feels very rushed and details aren't drastically different across the entire body, and there are little or no defining or unique characteristics. I should have also created a low poly topology with animation in mind, as the current topology gives little room for the limbs to animate independently from the body, which was the primary cause of the gratuitous stretching during the walk cycle mentioned previously. And that's all for this video, thanks for watching.